we're getting a new window into the collapse of the House Intelligence Committee's Russia investigation. One of the final straws, an ugly hearing in which President Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, cursed out Democrats and refused to answer their questions. Our senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju, has been digging on this. Manu, what are you hearing from your sources?
Well, this was an investigation, Wolf, that got increasingly contentious all the way to the bitter end and culminated in this very heated interview with the former Trump campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. And we're learning new details about that testimony where he apparently cursed at Democrats on the panel repeatedly. But after he testified, the investigation ended and left the public no closer to learning the truth of what actually happened when Russians meddled in the 2016 elections. Behind closed doors, the House Intelligence Committee's Russia investigation broke down.
We are adjourned.
After a bitter feud erupted with President Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Sources tonight providing new details to CNN about last month's contentious hearing with Lewandowski,
I've done enough.
who refused to answer a range of questions from Democrats, including communications with President Trump and what he knew about the firing of FBI Director James Comey. Lewandowski's sources say cursed multiple times at Democratic lawmakers, including Jackie Speer of California, at one point saying, "I'm not going to answer your effing questions." While Democrats objected, Republicans defended Lewandowski, saying he had answered all questions relevant to the committee's investigation. Lewandowski told CNN that I had to repeat on multiple occasions that there was no collusion, cooperation, or coordination because the Democrats couldn't understand my plain English way of speaking. Lewandowski was the final witness in an investigation that has ended amid deep mistrust between both parties, with Republicans concluding they found no evidence of Trump campaign collusion with Russia, and Democrats charging that the GOP stifled the inquiry. But as the House probe falters, special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is aggressively moving. Sources tell CNN that at least 3 Russian oligarchs have been targeted for questioning by Mueller's team, one of whom was stopped in the New York area and had his electronics searched when his private jet landed. The investigators want to know whether wealthy Russians illegally funneled cash donations directly or indirectly to Trump's campaign and inauguration.
Well, I think it shows that Mueller is, in the old white Watergate sense, following the money.
As Mueller makes his move, the Trump administration now ratcheting up pressure on Moscow, preparing its toughest action in response to Russian interference in the 2016 campaign, with plans to issue new sanctions against several oligarchs tied to Russian President Vladimir Putin, according to 2 senior administration officials. In response, a Kremlin spokesman said there are no oligarchs in Russia. Even though President Trump has remained mostly silent or undercut his own intelligence committee's findings about Russian election meddling, Washington is now engaged in an escalating feud with Moscow after accusations that Russia was behind the poisoning of a former spy and his daughter on British soil. The U.S. has since moved to expel dozens of Russian diplomats, prompting Moscow to retaliate, kicking out American diplomats from Russia. The State Department confirming 60 U.S. diplomats left Russia today. Still, even some Trump allies, including outgoing National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, say not enough has been done to punish Russia.
We have failed to impose sufficient costs.
Tonight, scrutiny also intensifying over the data analytics firm tied to the Trump campaign, Cambridge Analytica, and how it accessed private data from Facebook users. Facebook now says the firm may have obtained information from 87 million Facebook users, up from its previous estimate of 50 million.
At the end of the day, this is my responsibility.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg set to face a grilling on Capitol Hill next week about how his company worked with Cambridge Analytica and how his company failed to root out Russian interference.
We didn't focus enough on preventing abuse and thinking through how people could use these tools to do harm as well. And that goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, hate speech, in addition to developers and data privacy.
So now, after we reported on Corey Lewandowski's appearance before the House Intelligence Committee, he told me that Democrats on the committee were the first to use foul language during his testimony, Wolf, and he said, I felt the need to respond in kind. He said, quote, the language they used in the committee was appalling. He also said, I've never heard such language used before. Now, Lewandowski said he did not recall what precisely was said, and he would not name the Democratic members of the committee he was referring to. So, Wolf, the debate continues going forward about what exactly Corey Lewandowski said, but no one disputes some rather tough language exchanged in the final witness interview that led to this result of this
very, very ugly indeed. Manu, good reporting. Thank you very much. Let's talk about all the breaking news, including President Trump's first comments on the Stormy Daniels controversy. Joining us now, Congressman Adriano Espaillat. He's a Democrat who serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, first of all, do you believe President Trump when he says he didn't know about that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
It's hard to believe that he didn't know, but nevertheless, he said that he didn't know. He sends this to his attorney, and his signature is not in the document, in the agreement. And that leads to a question of whether or not he was truly a party to the agreement, and that will play out in whatever legal proceedings are ahead of us.
Do you think there's a role for Congress? Should Congress be investigating this $130,000 payment?
I believe so. I believe that it was done prior to the election. It was done during campaign season, and it was hush money to acquire somebody up. And I think that there's a role for Congress to play in looking into this particular matter.
To look into whether 11 days before the election, this was, as some people have suggested, an in-kind campaign contribution that would be illegal.
That could be construed to be an in-kind campaign contribution, and if such, it will be an illegal contribution. And I think there's plenty of room to look into that and to get to the bottom of it and figure out whether or not it was legal.
Let's get to some other sensitive issues, Congressman. While I have you, the president says he won't replace his attorney general with Scott Pruitt, but he was considering doing exactly that as recently as earlier this week. Do you believe the attorney general, Jeff Sessions, is safe?
Well, I thought we were going to catch a break and perhaps we wouldn't get that citizenship question in our census form, since it was the Justice Department that asked for the citizenship question to be in the census application. But look, we've seen people go and come and leave the White House in a short period of time. The turnover has been tremendous. I would not be surprised if the Attorney General will be subjected as well to some kind of pressure to leave in, if not now, in the future. The president may be looking at avenues and ways to try to get to Mueller in the future. So we got to be watchful. Congress must be watchful, and we got to really uphold the rule of law.
If Sessions, the Attorney General, were fired, Congressman, and a new Attorney General was confirmed, someone who would be in charge now of the Mueller investigation as opposed to Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, would that raise, at least in your mind, the question of obstruction of justice?
Well, I don't know if I could take it to that level, but certainly it will raise serious doubts as to whether or not by changing the Attorney General, the White House is trying to get at Mueller, who continues to move forward, continues to put the pressure on, the heat on, and as we saw today, the oligarchs in Russia are now under his radar. And so he's moving forward, and this is a serious and credible investigation. People have been charged and arrested for it. It comes closer and closer to the White House, and I think he's got a lot to go further. So we'll see what transpires in the next few months.
And on another issue, Scott Pruitt is facing calls for his resignation from the Environmental Protection Agency. What does it say to you, Congressman, that President Trump is defending him? He said just on Air Force One, I think he's done a fantastic job. He's a fantastic person. I just left coal and energy country. They love Pruitt. He's referring to West Virginia. They feel strongly and love him. What does that say to you?
Well, clearly there's been some ethical lapses that have emerged with Pruitt. His renting of an apartment at $50 a night, he claims it was sort of like an Airbnb deal, kind of like a sweet deal for Washington. The rent is pretty high down there. But nevertheless, he rented this apartment from someone that has clear links to the energy industry and that has business before the EPA. So clearly a potential conflict of interest. So these ethical lapses that are mushrooming around Pruitt are troubling, and for him to speak highly about this particular person in his cabinet, I think is troubling as well.